This is QTV News and I am Jenna Basonko. First, the main local, international and sports news headlines. The debate about whether the country will get a new constitution goes on following the National Assembly's rejection of the draft last year. A stakeholders forum took place on Monday. We hear about training to address the often overlooked but important role children have in disaster risk reduction. We hear the inspirational life story of a Gambian scientist who overcame great adversity and who is now at the head of the creation of a coronavirus vaccine. And the First Lady continues her engagement with the education sector by donating some welcome face masks to the Ministry of Education. In international news, Chad's President Idriss Déby shows no intention of stepping down after 30 years in power. His country heads to the poll in April and Déby seeks a sixth term in office. Is China's influence in Africa now extending to the media? If so, should we be worried? In sports news, we bring you the latest after some exciting encounters in the women's and men's volleyball league. The Afcorn Under-20 tournament kicked off in Mauritania on Sunday, but Gambia's young Scorpions will have to wait till Tuesday to get into action. Those were the main headlines, and now the news in detail. Do stay with us. Thank you for joining us, and now the news in detail. The debate about whether the country will get a new constitution goes on following the National Assembly's rejection of the draft last year. The Center for Research and Policy Development on Monday organized a forum for stakeholders to discuss the state of the 2020 draft constitution and the future of democracy in the Gambia.
The gathering brought together lawmakers, politicians, civil society organizations, among others, to assess the draft constitution and what it means for the future of our democracy. Welcoming the stakeholders, the executive director of the Center for Research and Policy Development, Seth Matijau, said the gathering is important because the country needs dialogue about the current state of our constitution.
For the state and democracy to survive, the citizens must be willing and ready to make it survive for their collective interest. Therefore, it is the primary duty of all stakeholders with the key responsibilities in society to meet, discuss and share ideas on how they can make their work easy and beneficial to the public they serve. And for us at the Center for Research and Policy Development, our vision is to support the transformation of the Gambia into a democratically governed community. Our mission is to maintain a one-stop center for data on legislative processes, citizen voices, and policy development.
The newly appointed Solicitor General, Hussein Tomasi, said the constitutional crisis in the country is disappointing, but this has happened in other countries before a consensus is reached. The Solicitor General is not ruling out the possibility of moving the referendum beyond June, which he said will be due to the ongoing negotiations with stakeholders spearheaded by Goodluck Jonathan, the former Nigerian president.
It's quite possible that we could miss the IEC referendum. Let me emphasize that. But I'm not saying it's a certainty, but it's possible, and we should start factoring that possibility. Of course, I know international lawyers would easily draw my attention to the fact that there is the ECOWAS protocol on governance and on democracy and good governance, to the effect that no substantial modifications shall be made to electoral laws for the last 6 months before elections. We are conscious of that, and but what is important to note also about that provision is that there is an exception to the law.
Salih Utal, the president of the Gambia Bar Association, said the Gambia uprooted a dictator in 2016 and installed a government that is expected to rule by the dictates of democracy. He emphasized the need for major changes, especially with the constitution.
We are at a crossroad as a country. We will have elections in, I think, December 4th. And I think this will be high-stakes elections. We are a very polarized country as we speak. We're divided on for so many reasons, and it is important that we speak together as a country. We have a framework that makes sure that we as a Gambian know the rules of the game clearly. And the Constitution, for me, is an embodiment, is the most important document. If you like, if you're Muslim, it's your Quran. If you're Christian, it's your Bible.
The chairman of the Association of Non-Governmental Organizations, Tango, John Charles Njai, says the problem we are facing with regards to our draft constitution is due to the clash between selfish politicians. He went further to blame the National Assembly for slowing the growth of the country.
Or who do these politicians think they are to decide for Gambians what is best for us? What Gambians have called for is to have a constitution before us, and in a referendum we will decide whether we want what we want and what we don't want. The problem in our country really is beyond even the borough administration. The problem with our country is our parliament. We talk about reforms. There are 2 bills before our National Assembly. 2 bills. Access to Information Law and Anti-Corruption Bill. From 2019, today, the opposition is asking where the president is getting vehicles from. When an anti-corruption bill is before you, that you could put in place, have a commission in place, and begin to ask the questions that you are asking politically.
Participants took turns to share their views on the draft constitution. Babu Karsi, QTV News.
Children have the right to participate in the things that affect their lives and as such have a significant role to play in the increased resilience and greater sense of control and security that can be achieved through disaster risk reduction. In this report, we take a look at the significance of child-led disaster risk reduction. The National Disaster Management Agency, NDMA, is currently training 75 students across the Greater Banjul area on disaster risk reduction, specifically mapping and hazard identification. Mapping and hazard identification are the foundations upon which all emergency planning efforts in a community are built. Preparing a good hazard assessment and vulnerability profile is the first step emergency planning agencies and communities should take in building an effective emergency management program. This program is a part of a project using drones and early warning systems to reduce the impact of flooding.
Young people in DRR normally are the most hardest hit vulnerable groups. In this, we really want to build their understanding. And we realize that understanding DRR cannot be at the highest level of education, but it has to start from our primary and secondary education. And this is actually in line with the POA, that is the Program of Action for African Union, member states to ensure that DRR is mainstream in our educational curriculum from the primary to the secondary and tertiary level.
According to the United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction, UNDRR, evidence shows that DRR can be one of the most cost-effective development interventions. DRR saves lives and protects valuable and scarce resources such as food, livestock and property, including children, in the decision-making processes, can be a significant part of the process.
We're the future leaders of our country and we need to know what's going on in our community in order to understand mapping and hazard identification to contribute in solving the problems of disasters in the country.
This exercise is in line with Sendai Framework Target G, which is to sustainably increase the availability of and access to multi-hazard early warning systems and disaster risk information and assessments to the people by 2030. Community leaders across the Greater Banjul area will also be trained as part of the project. Reporting for QTV News, I am Jenna Bosonko. From grass to grace, a Gambian UK-based scientist of Oxford University shares his story to inspire and motivate a generation on how he managed to overcome the fear of dropping out of school to becoming a scientist at some point at the world's leading universities. QTV's Momodu Lamin Choi has been speaking to him, and this is his report.
This is Dr. Mustafa Bite, one of the core scientists in the development of the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine. He is a postdoctoral researcher at the Jenner Institute of the University of Oxford, one of the world's 10 top universities. The journey to this stage of his career has reached a turning point, putting him in the spotlight as part of the team tasked to save the world during a global pandemic.
I like to bring about a positive change to people's life, and science gave me that opportunity to do that. And since then, I just fall in love with the field because everything I was doing, was to make life better for people, was to improve health, was to contribute, to the development of policies, that will make, society better.
Saving people's lives comes with the challenge of how to realize that ambitious goal for a man whose family struggled to keep their children in school due to financial constraints. Due to the family's poor financial situation, one of his brothers dropped out of school, and gripped by fear and sadness, his brother's unfortunate situation gave him a sober reflection on the potential of what could become of his life and that of his family.
Up till today, I feel so bad that my brother, couldn't make it. But then, things happen in life and you just have to embrace it and then you just, move on from those. So for me, when that happened, I knew, I was next, on the line for that to happen. And I knew if that happens to me, it will affect, obviously, my other brothers, who were also next in line.
It is often said that passion negates fear. At this point of his life, learning how to survive poverty to continue his education became the roadmap towards success to counter the fear of failure. So, lobbying for support became an option for a solution to protecting his education advancement. Finally, this got him scholarships through to his junior and senior secondary school levels.
Luckily, I went to, lobby for more support, and then the support came from somewhere I never expected it. That was from a Danish family, who was coming to the Gambia on tourism. And, I happened to bang on them in the beach, where I was just, going around trying to sell peanuts, to make ends meet. So this is not like, a journey that I will look around and say, oh yeah, it was all rosy, it went, as, the way I wanted and stuff like that. But all those hurdles, I learned from them and they teach me one thing, which is to be resilient and persistent in what my dream was.
A chance meeting a family of tourists became a crucial moment of his life and that of his brothers who eventually got support from the same philanthropists. From there, I learned how to move on, and what happened next became the beginning of something great for my life, he tells QTV.
So all these challenges, are things I experienced in life and, they only made me better. And so whoever you are, whatever you do in life, if you love what you're doing, you will find a way, whatever happens, whatever situation, you find yourself into, you will find a way to navigate around that situation and then, get to the path that you want to get to, to keep moving towards your dream.
It is in the Gambia where his scientific career began at the Medical Research Council as a research assistant. Dr. Bite completed a BSc in Biomedical Science with distinction as the best student in that program at the University of Westminster. The postdoctoral Oxford researcher finally did his PhD in microbial and proteomics at the University of Aberdeen. Currently, as a postdoctoral researcher at the Jenner Institute of the University of Oxford, he is involved in one of the world's leading vaccine developments, a success story he said is driven by passion to succeed and to save lives. Mahmoud Lamin Choi, QTV News.
We will take a short commercial break, and when we come back, we have some more local news stories. Do stay tuned. Welcome back from that short commercial break. If you're just tuning in, this is QTV News. Now, the First Lady Fatoumata Barrow on Monday donated more than 50,000 face masks to the Ministry of Basic and Secondary Education to be used for schools. Aliu Sise has the rest of that.
The recent resurgence of COVID-19 cases in the country calls for renewed commitment to ensure the safety of the public, particularly school-going children who are quite vulnerable to contracting the virus during interaction with peers at school. This is not the first time the First Lady has extended such a donation to the ministry since the advent of the pandemic. She had made similar donations in the past and also visited schools to sensitize school children about the deadly virus. Receiving the face masks, Colonel Cole, the Minister of Basic and Secondary Education, applauded the First Lady for what she calls her consideration of the Ministry of Education.
She's always considerate. It is good for us to safeguard their health and to make sure that they are kept safe and healthy during this time of pandemic of COVID, and especially during this second wave that is, we have been told, is more dreadful than the first one. We want to be thankful to God that since we officially resume school for all the children from ECD up to senior secondary, our schools are still going on, and it's because of the generous donation and kind consideration of people like the First Lady, who have been donating us masks and other PPEs to make sure that the schools are kept safe and healthy.
Minister Cole gave assurances of the proper use of the donated face masks for the protection of the school-going children. Reporting for QTV News, I am Alu Sise.
Job creation projects are always welcome as they provide opportunities for people to earn a living. The First Lady Fatoumata Barbaro on Saturday presided over the inauguration of Bass Group Fish Factory at Tanje Seaside. The project is expected to create employment for women and youths and help solve some pressing fish processing needs. Babu Ajibintu Drame Rada has the rest of that.
Celebrating with acoustic cultural music and dance, an emblem of women's voice in the Gambia, the First Lady Fatou Barbaro presided over the occasion to show support and also to give voice to the views of women in the fishing sector. Momodu Sidibe, who represented the Minister of Fisheries, applauded the CEO of Bass Group for his contribution towards the country's national development.
Directly on the policy objective concerning the use of fish to improve the nutritional standards of the population, increase employment opportunities, and expanding Gambian participation in the fisheries sector. The project is therefore a direct complement to what we are aiming at, and I am hopeful that it will also serve as a synergy with other development actions.
The CEO of Bass Group is a Senegalese national. Senegalese ambassador to the Gambia, Bassirou Sen, says this action is laudable as it will inspire and strengthen the relationship between the Gambia and Senegal.
He brings his knowledge, capacities in the field of ice and fisheries industry, creating hundreds of employees, benefiting to lot of families and valuable income to the Gambia budget. Mr. Malik Bass is an example of young intellectuals, serious, clean, well-educated, who decide to bring his part and play a key role in the construction of a resilient and successful Senegambia.
A short documentary of the factory was shown. It was very difficult for us. We used to buy ice from Banjul and Burfoot. We wake up at early hours to look for ice. It was very difficult. Now, mashallah, Malik is a godsend. Fatou Barbaro, the Gambia's First Lady, congratulated the Bass Group for investing, most especially within one of the primary fishing towns in the Gambia. She further highlights the plight of women as they are central and key in the fishing sector.
There is an increased national concern for these realities and challenges women and youth face, especially in fisheries and agriculture sector. Although government of the Gambia continue to work with various partners to address some of these challenges.
Malik Bass, the CEO of Bass Group, thanks staff, friends and loved ones for their endorsement and heartfelt welcome gift to them.
Li ma mëna wax dal moy vraiment di sante Yalla.
What I can say is to thank God. The ambassador has said all about the Senegambia relationship. I would like to thank the First Lady for her efforts and endorsement, and the two presidents, Barrow and Macky Sall. And I thank the natives of Tanje who helped me tirelessly.
Mr. Bass further spoke of the challenges he faced to set up the factory.
Because the thing is private investment. It's me invested. So I just do it and we do it.
Expressing well wishes and showing gratitude, dignitaries and friends also attended the event. Awards were also given to associates. These types of investment in the fisheries sector will create more avenues for Gambian women and youths and access in their productivity to supply both local and international markets and also create their earning capacities. Ajibintu Drame, QTV News.
We will take another short commercial break, and when we come back, we have international and sports news. Do stay tuned. Welcome back from that short commercial break. If you're just tuning in, this is QTV News. On to some international news. The people of Chad will head to the polls on April 11th for a presidential election, where long-term ruler Idris Deby is running for a 6th term. However, his bid has seen rising tensions among Chadians. Aliou Cisse has the rest of that.
President Idris Deby has ruled Chad for the past 40 years, putting him fifth on the list of the current longest-serving presidents on the continent. Deby, a former army chief, came to power in the 1990 rebellion that removed former dictator Hissène Habré in a coup. From there, Deby went on to win Chad's post-independence elections in 1996 and was re-elected in 2001. In a move that is becoming common across Africa, a 2005 referendum removed the two-term limit from the constitution, and Deby continued as president, winning the presidential elections in 2006, 2011, and 2016. Obsessed with staying in power, in 2018, Chad amended its constitution, broadening Deby's powers and extending presidential term from 5 to 6 years. And although the new constitution reintroduced two-term limit, this will be applied retroactively, leaving Deby free to stand for president until 2033. Last week, his party officially nominated the 68-year-old to run for a 6th term in elections scheduled for April 11, 2021. Defying a government ban on protests under coronavirus laws, the long-time ruler's nomination saw several hundred people gathered in the capital, N'Djamena, with demonstrators setting tires on fire while chanting, "Leave Deby." Police fired tear gas at the protesters and arrested more than 50 people. One of those present was prominent opposition politician Success Masra. Masra's party, the Transformers, had called for a peaceful march to demand justice and reforms, yet he ended up seeking refuge within the security perimeter of the US Embassy along with 10 other party members to escape being arrested. Masra has called on the intervention of Western powers such as France, Germany, European Union, and the US to pressure Deby to stop violations of fundamental rights. Deby's decade in power, according to many, has seen mismanagement and falling oil prices exacerbated poverty and raised discontent in the landlocked country in Africa's Sahel belt. Despite its sizable reserves of crude oil, Chad is one of the poorest countries where 2/3 of its 15.8 million people live in abject poverty, said the World Food Programme. Corruption, bribery, and nepotism are endemic in Chad, added Freedom House's online profile on Chad. Deby is accused by his opponents of paralyzing the country's institutions to stay on in power. Everything is said to be centralized around the presidency and his inner circle. Western governments, such as France, a country that has special relations with Chad, however, view Chad as an important player in the fight against Islamic militias in the Sahel region. French President Emmanuel Macron, for example, is expected to attend the G5 Sahel summit in Chad this week. Ahead of the April polls, the oppositions are devising a different approach to remove Deby. In the past, ethnic divisions have weakened the opposition's effort to unite. Last week, Tuesday, more than a dozen opposition parties announced that they were supporting a joint candidate, 55-year-old political newcomer Théophile Bongoro, to avoid splitting the anti-Deby vote. Bongoro wants power to be handed on democratically through the ballot box. However, some political analysts doubt the opposition alliance will achieve much. Chadians are skeptical that the election will be free and fair. For his opponents, the man who in 1990 had promised the Chadians he will bring them not gold or silver but freedom and democracy will be vying for 6th term as president with neither gold nor silver nor democracy for that matter. The presidential election will be followed by a legislative ballot set for October 24th. It has been repeatedly postponed since 2015. What is clear is that Idris Deby and Chadians are only a reflection of the sad reality of and about several other African leaders and their people. Even if he wins, he still has a long way to catch up with the continent's longest elected ruler, Equatorial Guinea's Theodore Obiang, who has already done 41.5 years in power. Reporting for QTV News, I am Aliou Cisse.
The expansion of China's media presence in Africa has raised concerns over its influence on journalism, leading some critics to contend that it will introduce normative values that would pose a threat to media freedom and independence. Momodou Mbouch tells us more.
By employing state-funded TV, radio, online and social media outlets, Beijing has successfully built the largest network of correspondents worldwide through its Xinhua news agency, according to Joseph Odindo, a veteran Kenyan journalist. He said in Africa, Kenya was used as the launching pad beginning in 2006 when Xinhua's regional office was moved from Paris to Nairobi, where the Africa Bureau of the China Global Television Network, CGTN, is also headquartered. The first Chinese Overseas Television Broadcasting and Production Center was opened in Nairobi in 2012. The same year, an African weekly edition of the China Daily English language newspaper began printing. Chinese investment in Kenya's media industry has created jobs, introduced state-of-the-art technology, trained many budding journalists, and built out many struggling media houses. According to one media analyst, the bottom line when it comes to China is that the sheer economic power that the Chinese bring in the media field on the continent is very hard to fend off. This is true not only in Kenya, but right across the continent in varying degrees. And the development, widely seen as a way for China to extend its soft power and project a positive image of China, has been the focus of much debate and discussions. While Western media have historically been criticized for using cliched portrayals of Africa, concerns about Chinese media extend to a hypothetical influence on values such as press freedom and the media's watchdog role in a democracy. The assumption is that Chinese media values, practices, and culture will exercise a significant influence on the way media content in Africa is produced, and that Chinese newsmaking standards will impact audiences' normative expectations of the media's role in African societies and their understanding of African society and politics. The adversarial watchdog model of journalism would be supplanted by an anodyne so-called constructivist model, which does nothing but simply legitimize the official narrative, which is not always the factual account. On the other side of the debate is the view that one must not be held captive by the Western perspective of news. The Chinese perspective must be given a chance. Western unease about Chinese media influence has seen Britain and Germany revoke the license of China's state-owned broadcaster, CGTN, within the last week. What is arguably less emphasized in the debate is the efficacy of what has been described as the Chinese-mediated public diplomacy. How have journalists and audiences been responding to the Chinese penetration and influence? Studies done among South African journalists have found that, in fact, Chinese media have very little impact on the routines and attitudes of journalists in the country. Similar studies in Kenya yielded a similar finding. While some journalists have adopted Chinese media as a source of information, they only access them sporadically and remain critical of their content. Others remain unconvinced of the value of Chinese media for their work, and some actively resist them on the basis that Chinese media are a mouthpiece for government. The reports further found that university students in South Africa and the general public in Kenya consume limited Chinese news. Some historians have pointed out that this is not the first time that China has established a media presence on the continent. As far back as the 1960s and 1970s, Chinese media has been active. What is different now is that the recent expansion is seen widely as being linked to broader Chinese activities on the continent and its changing international relations policy. But as the report cited suggest, journalists and consumers of news are far subtler in how they decode media messages than they are sometimes given credit for. For QTV News, I am Mahmoud Mbowe.
Now on to some sports news. In volleyball, Olymp Africa consolidated their title defense with a 3 straight sets win against the Gambia Armed Forces male team, whose women's team won 3-2 against Olymp Africa on Sunday. Momodu Gajaga has the rest of that.
Signs of a team with strong team spirit and desire for victory. Olymp Africa's male team began an onslaught that could not be matched by the Soldiers team. The first quarter was tightly contested, but not so the subsequent quarter. A team inspired with the athleticism and energy of Alpha Cisse would not be easy to match. His passing and defending abilities shaped a performance which posed questions to which the GAF team had no answers.
I feel delightful and excited because we train for it. Yeah, because champions never rest. I'm playing for the people and especially for my family. They got the belief in me, so I got to play and prove it as well. I can say I'll be playing for passion, but then after, I sit and think about, hey, now I got to make a move. Either I choose it for passion or as a profession. Guess now I'm ready to be a professional.
Elsewhere, Gambia Armed Forces women's team played against Olymp Africa in the early kickoff. The two strong female teams were separated by a 5th set tie-break after sharing the first 4 sets 2-all. With some key players injured, GAF struggled to control the game. Olymp Africa's women appeared strong and looked on course to cause a shock, but lost the momentum in the final stages of the deciding set, with GAF women team winning 3-2 in the end. Our Conte had a strong showing for the Soldiers team. Mamadou Gajaga, QTV News.
The long wait is over and the Afcorn Under-20 tournament is finally underway in Mauritania. Gambia's young Scorpions are among the 12 teams hoping to scoop this coveted prize. Adidrame has the rest of that.
The tournament kicked off on Sunday, the 14th of February, and will conclude on Saturday, the 6th of March. Mauritania was selected to host in 2018 when no one had thoughts of having to deal with COVID-19. This will be the first edition of the Under-20 tournament to have 12 teams instead of 8. The top 4 teams of the tournament would have normally qualified for the 2021 FIFA Under-20 World Cup in Indonesia as the CAF representatives. However, on 24 December 2020, FIFA cancelled that tournament due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Gambia find themselves drawn in a tough Group C, which includes Ghana, previous winners on 4 occasions, and Morocco, previous winners on 3 occasions. The biggest team missing are 7 times champion Nigeria, who were eliminated in the qualifiers by Ghana. 6 teams will be contesting this trophy for the first time, and one of those, Tanzania, are the other team in Gambia's group. As was witnessed at the Chan tournament in Cameroon earlier this month, host Mauritania put on a colourful and splendid opening ceremony, which displayed various facets of the country's diverse ethnic groups and cultures. After that, it was down to action and down to business as the hosts lined up against Cameroon to get the on-field action underway. An entertaining and hard-fought first half saw the teams go into the dressing rooms with the match tied 0-0 at half-time. It was more of the same in the second half as both teams pressed to get the breakthrough. Perhaps it was no surprise that the man to do it was Cameroon's Sunday Jang Jr., who settled the match 9 minutes from time when he lashed onto Abu Jallo's weak back pass, beat the onrushing keeper before poking the ball into an unguarded net. Sunday Jang Jr. had won the Golden Boot as top scorer in the Central African Zone qualifiers for this tournament. Mauritania pushed hard but could not find that elusive equaliser, and the game ended 1-0 to Cameroon. There was a crumb of comfort for Mauritania as their skillful left-footed player Omar Mbarek was voted man of the match. He already looks a class player and could join previous stars of this tournament, including Benny McCarthy, Mohamed Salah, Andre Ayew and Kelechi Iheanacho in forging a successful career in the game. Uganda and Mozambique kick off the first of 3 games on the second day of the action on Monday. Gambia's start is a tough one as they kick off against Morocco on Tuesday. Doubtless, fans around the world will be tuning in to see their favourites and see how they do. Lots and lots to look forward to. For QTV News, I am Ade Darami.
And just an update on the Under-20 Afcorn in Monday's early games. Uganda overcame Mozambique 2-0. Burkina Faso and Tunisia drew 0-0. Before we end this news bulletin, let's take a quick look at our main stories. The debate about whether the country goes on following National Assembly's rejection of the draft last year, a stakeholders forum took place on Monday. We hear about a training to address the often overlooked but important role children have in disaster risk reduction. We hear the inspirational life story of a Gambian scientist who overcame great adversity and who is now at the head of the creation of a coronavirus vaccine. And the First Lady continues her engagement with the education sector by donating some welcome face masks to the Education Ministry. In international news, Chad's President Idriss Déby shows he has no intention of stepping down after 30 years in power. His country heads to the poll in April 11th, and Déby seeks a 6th term in office. Is China's influence in Africa now expanding to the media? If so, should we be worried? In sports news, we brought you the latest news after some exciting encounters in the women's and men's volleyball. Well, that is all we have for you in this edition of QTV News. Do join us at 10 for another bulletin. Thanks for watching. Do take care of yourselves and have a great week ahead.